welcome to Fiber Trek. My name is Sarah. Welcome. You are most welcome to my studio space here in the Northwoods of Maine. We are going to be revisiting an old hand quilting project that I am looking forward to sharing with you some progress on. We are going to chat also about a new book that I've added to my library, and we are going to take down the to-do and in-progress baskets from my shelf. If you are a patron of this podcast, a deep, heartfelt thank you. If you've donated through coffee, I so appreciate the financial contributions. It is encouraging and humbling. I'm so glad that you're all here on this creative journey. Let's catch up. This is the Clava Quilt by Miss May Make, and I had a recent win in completing the center block of the quilt, which I am hand stitching. This was super motivating. I know many of us feel that, where we set something aside because we're in between process or skill sets, and I had a really hard time in the summer working on this because it's hot to have on my lap, and just trying to find the best way that I can excel at hand stitching on it. Is it in a hoop? Is it hand on my lap or on the table? And I continue to be inspired by Kate of the Last Homely House, and she and Anna, her daughter-in-law, recently talked about hand stitching their quilts, getting them out on the tables, and just doing some running stitch. And I was really motivated and encouraged by her work. And so I did that, and I finished the center panel. I am doing running stitch on the outer edges of all the moons in a matching blue Aurifil 12 weight cotton thread, and I am matching as best I can the color of each of the moons in the corresponding Aurifil 12 weight thread. And each of the moons I've decided to do some sort of stitched motif, I think. So this center stitch is an orange peel. I think that's what it's called. It's also a sashiko motif, and I used a book to kind of translate that on a grid. I do find that piece a little intimidating, like having to grid out all these moons, and maybe that was also creating a little resistance for progress. On this second half moon, I just opted to do a fan shape, and I thought it was going to be kind of blah and not very interesting, but I've ended up really loving it, and I'm going to mirror it on the other side, and then again trace each moon in the blue running stitch. So as I kind of assess this quilt, it really does go quite quickly. I'm not being fussy about the size of my running stitches. I'm trying to keep them, about 1/8 of an inch. But mostly I just am interested in getting it done and quilted down. I kind of like that bit of design aesthetic that it provides, the running stitch kind of being big. It's very heavily quilted, and yeah, so I'm liking the way it's looking, and again, very encouraged by other people's work, and so I got to haul this out. I like having it right here. I have found that stitching on the table is the most comfortable for me. I can't leave it out in this working household of our door comes right into our kitchen, so you come right from outside into the main living portion. So this is where, drill batteries get dumped and snowmobile helmets and all of the stuff that goes with kind of living the lifestyle that we lead. So I can't necessarily leave it out, but I have found that I have it out of the hoop. I don't it's easier for me to store. I don't worry about fussing up the material. So I feel like I'm in a better space with this particular project, and I'm really motivated to finish this section here on a couple weekends so that I can think about what I want to do in the blue sections. So again, this is the Clava Quilt by Miss May Makes. It is a digital pattern. I think you can also buy paper copy. I did use my cutting machine, my Cricut, to cut the curved pieces as well as the pies. And I wouldn't say that it's a very challenging quilt. It just, you need to be mindful of when you're easing in those curves. So I really loved it. I used Corky's from Wyndham Fabrics and this kind of metallic effect of different shades and gradients. So I really would love to get this done because I've had it a long time, and it's good to complete things, but also it's good to engage in the process. There is, for me, nothing like running stitch, and I'd forgotten how much I really loved it. I know I hand stitched that last quilt block, the Stars Upon Stars, and I loved it. I've done a lot of Alabama Channon clothing, which is a lot of running stitch and reverse applique, which I love. So I don't know what took me so long to get back here. I think in my latest video of the turning of the year, I talked a little bit about some of the gift knitting I've been doing and feeling like I'd love to get that done and off the needles and clear the decks so that I can just kind of, wander around some of these projects. Yes, that is a grain mill. To add to all of the other fun kitchen gadgets that have come my way this season, I have really enjoyed this piece of my cooking period, or cooking season, I guess you could say. I received the book Tartine for Christmas from my parents, which is a bread book from a bakery in California. And there is a discussion in the book about milling your own flour for taste. And that was really compelling for me, and I wanted to go there. And I thought this would be a really fun, creative endeavor in the kitchen. I enjoy baking content and cooking content, and so this is my contribution to that genre. So be prepared for more bread baking and bread extravaganzas. For this first recipe, I experimented with a tried and true recipe from Mary's Bread Basket and Soup Kettle that was given to me by my grandmother. This is the whole wheat egg bread. I used a portion of all-purpose flour after doing some research and kind of working with this different type of texture. But all in all, I was super satisfied. I'm all about the bread. Be prepared. Not only have I been having a love affair with kitchen gadgetry and cookbooks, but I've also fallen in love with cozy publishing. I picked up Arctic Knitting by Anna Kokanami, and it is a delight. It has all the hallmarks of the other books that I've purchased through this publisher, that beautiful linen book cloth, beautiful landscape, moody photos highlighting gorgeous knitwear in northern landscapes. I couldn't be more thrilled. I also, at this time, purchased a cookbook from Lapland, which is by the same publisher and has very similar features. They are divided up by seasonality. They reflect the landscape in their design and their ingredients. I'll be featuring a little bit more about the cookbook over on the Patreon vlog. This is the same publisher that has also put out Sari Norland's latest collection. If I were going to write a book, I think I would want Cozy Publishing to work with me. I just love everything about the presentation and having it in my hands. This book is available here in the States through a variety of different retailers, both in Scandinavian specialty shops and also yarn shops. I have an affiliate link with the Woolly Thistle, who is also carrying this book, but I was not sponsored and I purchased this item myself. I often get comments or questions about time and time management when it comes to all of my creative pursuits. And I don't want to sound redundant here because I think there's a lot of creatives out there talking about this, talking about process, talking about, creative flow, creative decision making, all of those things. And I am not technically trained at art school, and I get a lot of information and learning from others who I'm indebted to. But I thought that I would just kind of tie in a little bit of that conversation with uncovering some of my languishing projects. And they're not languishing necessarily because I don't like them, but they're languishing because I'm not using strategies. I think that would help me move through some of these, move through to completion. The top strategy that I've found is time management, right? Obvious, but even reducing it down more to being very specific about how much time. So 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. I've started setting my timer for 15 minutes for different projects as a way to just create a little movement. Sometimes I know that I get resistant or stuck with projects when they are in transition from, one skill to another, one material to another. So when you're working with multiple materials, multiple different colors, skeins of yarn, balling things up, for me, there can be just a little residual, like, oh, I'll get to it later. And then later turns into a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, a year. And so, finding a little bit of time to say, right, I've got 10 minutes between doing the dishes and taking Ruby out for a romp. What would be interesting, or what would I like to do? What can I do? And it is always surprising to realize what you can do in 10 minutes or 15 minutes, where before your thought process is like, oh, it's going to take forever. I have to go upstairs. I have to dig through this bin, etc. So I wanted to kind of employ that strategy with some of the things that have been hanging around in my space. It really started with the quilts, and I've been working on Cameron's quilt. If you've been following me, I did one for my niece. I haven't really made a lot of momentous progress on that. I have started to use the timer to give myself a little opportunity to say, yeah, I worked on it, or, yeah, this is working for me, or no, I'm not. So just starting 10 minutes, and if I choose to keep going, I will. And I've had a piece hanging around my studio, which was an English paper pieced medallion. And I have this was going to be part of a project for scraps. And it started with this block. If you've been with me for a while, you may remember I made a bunch of these not this summer, but a year ago. These are string blocks. The background I used is linen texture by Laundry Basket Quilts in the midnight color, I think. And I really wanted to find a project that would showcase this and I could combine the medallion. So the medallion has been hanging around and I've been very concerned that it's going to get stretched or something's going to happen to it where it won't work. And it's been weighing on my mind because I move it around a lot in the studio. I have it like draped over something. It falls down, I move it. So it's constantly kind of in my thought process. So I decided that I would take 15 minutes and sort out what I was going to do. And that 15 minutes turned into a whole afternoon, which I had the opportunity to do. But 15 minutes in of itself, 20 minutes in and of itself to just figure out, gather, problem solve around what next step needs to happen can be really helpful in creating a shift or overcoming a transition in the making. So what happened was I started with the medallion, mounting it onto a piece of fabric. So I needed to cut all this and get it to size and look at my numbers again. But here is the completed piece. I have hand stitched this in 12 weight Aurifil thread, blanket stitched it around onto the panel. And then I knew that I needed these borders, so I just decided to cut those and get that done. And then I am lining the whole panel piece with these foundation paper pieced owls. And I discovered, which is a wonderful thing about having a timer, I discovered that it only takes me 15 minutes to make one of these owls. To make one of these owls. And that was really helpful kind of way to frame a mindset, right? So sometimes we're like, oh my God, it's gonna take forever. Oh my God, it's a 2-hour thing. But in effect, wow, these only take me 15 minutes. Now, some things do take us 2 hours, I totally get it. But really kind of understanding how much time goes into a particular skill or piece or project can be motivating and or be very helpful in understanding if you want to move forward with it. So I felt so in the flow. I really felt that decision making was going smoothly. I just needed to breach this kind of cutting the fabric and getting the panel sorted out. And once I did that, everything kind of started to fall into place. And it's a really lovely feeling. This project is high on my list of priorities because it's my own. It does get into that decision making and it does get into this, for me, wondrous kind of piece. Like I'm wondering what will happen, what will it look like. It doesn't always work out in some of my knitting because I'm following somebody else's pattern. I know I choose my own colors, so there is a little bit of like, oh, well, what will that look like? But creating a piece from start to finish, I think really speaks to my wondrous self. Because I'm like, will it come together? Did I do the numbers right? And it's all mine. So I'm really, really thrilled with this particular piece. So that was kind of the beginning. And once I did that, I started to look around at my to-do buckets, which we saw me haul out. And I was kind of like, I wonder what else is in there that I could spend 15 minutes on. And what came up was my Lost Words make-along piece. Now I think this got laid to the side because of a material issue. I needed to order more material, and so I had to wait for it to arrive, and it arrived, and I set it aside, and then, I was on my way with something else. And so here it is, all put together. What I mean by all put together, all the pieces were together that I had completed. I also think I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do with this project when it was done. And so what I decided to do is I set the timer for 15 minutes and I gathered all the things that I needed to make it. So I got the shisha pieces, I got the floss, I got the Moire threads, M-O-I-R-E. This is 100% wool thread. I think it's from Spain, or I think it's Spanish. So I got these threads out, so it was all right there. And then I decided that I wanted to know how was this all going to come together? And so that's what I spent my 15 minutes on. And I decided to take this piece of felt that I made from my sheep's fleece. Whoa. Yeah. And I'm going to applique it on. Now the applique idea came from working on the quilt. I was like, oh, I could just kind of do this. These are all going to be connected to the whole thing. Now, the Lost Words Make-Along, if you've been with me for a while, was inspired by Jackie Morris, who is a watercolor artist and writer, and Robert McFarland, who is also a writer, and the work they did around the natural language that was going to be omitted from the Children's Oxford Dictionary. Some of you completed beautiful projects that participated in a make-along. I had created some energy around, you inspired by color, the name, the place. This was my particular piece. Words like beaver, ivy, signet, otter. So anyway, I really wanted to finish this. And again, one thing led to another and I put it all together. I have an idea and direction of where I'm going. All the materials are together and gathered. So that is right there on the top of the list. And I think it will be pretty quick to finish. One of the other ways that I brought that project into the fold is practicing the skill that I needed. So I did take some time to complete one row of the stitching. This stitching I cannot remember the name of for the life of me. I want to call it crosshatch stitch, but that's not it. But I did use Alabama Channon's book, Geometry of Hand Sewing, to chart out the dots to get that kinesthetic memory. So I took one, of my time blocks and I practiced a skill that I was going to need that maybe had fallen to the wayside, just to create a little memory around it. So there's that kind of mental piece. And then there's that kinesthetic engagement. It's like, can I get myself to remember the placement of the needle? How does that feel? So that the finished piece is meeting the expectations or matching with what I had before. So I wanted this to look similar to what I had done. This is kind of done a little freehand. So I needed to kind of remember that. And so I took some time to do that. So that's out there. The other thing that I found, which is so charming, and I'm super psyched to have it back in my, periphery, is this piece by Yoko Sito from her Scandinavian Quilts. This was supposed to turn into a trug, which you can carry supplies in. What I'm thinking is I'd like to just complete this piece itself and then maybe back it and turn it into a bag or some other decorative item on a bag or piece of clothing. So that's out. I love using all these little bits of fabric. I think this was part of the I can use up all my scraps experience, which I would like to do. So that's from Yoko Sahito. It's all ready to go. Materials are with it. That one I've not set the timer. I just know it's there, so I might put it into that rotation. The other thing that was in there was this set of Alabama Channon pieces that are complete. This is for her duster, and I think I might be a little different in my body than I was when I cut this. And so how did I feel about it? I'm definitely interested in completing the process of it. Am I interested in completing the whole thing? Maybe not so much right now, but I still have pieces that need to be finished that travel with me to and from my parents when I commute for work. So the process still interests me, so I'm keeping it in my idea box. I've been working quite a bit on my own mobility in my body, just to make sure that I can combat some pain that I've been having. So I've been putting a lot of attention into that skill set, which stretching and that lifting weights and all of those things as its own skill set. So again, the timer is really helpful. 30 minutes, 10 minutes of stretching here and there. But some of these items will kind of, make me reflect on other elements of my skill life that I need. So mobility is one of them. And perhaps through that work, it will also transform into my ability to wear that. I don't know. What else was unearthed in this basket or in these baskets? Not besides some scrap pieces that I kind of been saving. There was also some embroidery, both in partial completion and also ready to start work on. This particular piece is from Diana Vingart. I started this a couple years ago, and I'm stuck right here, which is I need to go watch the video on how to create these pine cones again. I also need to gather the supplies that I've been using for this piece. What happens is I'll decide to take it with me on the commute, and I'll just shove the threads in with more threads, like, oh yeah, I'll know where that is. And in fact, I don't. And so it becomes unorganized and stuffed away and put away. So I'm going to take 10 minutes and gather the threads that I'm using for this and put it all together so that I'm not kind of, when I see it, I don't need to like go do something else. So that's one of the plans for this. I have other embroidery that hasn't been started yet that I'd like to get to, but I am committed to finishing that first. The other piece that was in there was the completed front of a marshma, which is a type of sewing kit with Nordic roots. And I'm working on the front pocket. I have all of the material and the pattern there so I can cut the gusset. I think maybe I got hung up on this a bit because I was going to hand weave all of my own trim, and now I'm going to let that go. I'm going to complete this with trim that I have in my stash. So that's all put together. And then the big thing that was in here is a bunch of garments that are just about completed. They just need to have the neckline and armhole binding stitched on. They are knit pieces and based off of a dress from the company A Verb for Keeping Warm. The name of the pattern escapes me. It is originally drafted for a woven fabric, and I've done it in jersey. So I bind all of the armholes and the neckline with Cretan stitch and buttonhole thread. This is an Alabama Channon technique. This one is almost done. I just need to do that section. So that'll be an easy win for the summer. I have a shrug that I cut in here that needs a lot of work. This one I don't even like to look at. It's a lot of hand stitching on the hemline, and it goes all the way around the lower body. Put that at the bottom of the pile, I think. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of these that just need to be stitched. The binding just needs to be stitched on. Now you don't have to finish the armholes on this knit fabric or the edges. I just think it gives it a little bit better stability and it lays a little bit nicer. Of course I could wear this stuff without. Oh, there's a pair of wristlets that just need to have buttons put on. Who knew? There is a piece that needs to be stitched. This all has the parts cut. Here's some extra fabric, it looks like. Oh, and a bunch of binding strips for, and then there's this, oh, I didn't even know I had this in here. This is so cool. This is my whales, which need to be bound, but that'd be super fun. Come on, Sarah, what are you doing? Get this hand stitching out. What else is in here? Oh, more binding. Oh, swans. So fun. So much fun stuff. Swans. The nice thing about this fabric is it stretches, because I think I've had these for 2 years. And some beautiful folk art. So this bucket needs some attention. Needs more than 10 minutes, I think. But yeah, so those are some things that I've discovered. I know I mentioned the Yell and I mentioned Madison's sweater. I don't have that much to show you. Am I over here? I'm over there. I don't have that much to show you because it's mostly just moss stitch borders or hems. And yeah, I think we'll be talking a little bit more about knitting at the end of the month. I'm going to take those with me, and with any luck I will be working on the arms for Madison. I'd love to get that done and out to her. I did also get very close to completing a set of mittens that I had been working on since before the holiday, and yeah, so the knitting is kind of where it's been at since we last talked. On that note, I'm going to bid you a fond farewell. A deep, heartfelt thank you, as I always say, to those that contribute financially through Ko-fi or through Patreon. I so appreciate all of the kind comments, positive feedback. It is very encouraging and very humbling. I will see you next time. Many blessings and fond wishes. Take care. Bye.